The last few weeks have been extremely bad when it comes to internet piracy and internet archiving and whatnot. Just so many websites going down. You have the whole situation with Internet Archive, all that stuff is just really making people tense about the future of consuming general content that, yes, in the most cases, isn't available anywhere. And I think that's kind of the troubling thing, especially with this recent example, which I'm not going to say the name of the site because YouTube will get mad at me. I'm just going to call them nH going forward. You can see it on the screen. nH a couple days ago was inaccessible by a lot of people, and it stirred a lot of fears that the website itself was going down. But this is actually a whole situation that has been going on for over a month now. There was an attempt to try to find the identity of the actual site owners before this became basically a lawsuit. And at that point, there's a big, massive question mark at this point. Is this nH website going to exist going forward? I think now that it has come back up, a lot of people are kind of going, oh, thank you. Everything's fine now. A lot of people are scrambling to fill their hard drives full of everything that they like on the website, which I think is kind of a good thing at this point. If you can, and this stuff is important to you, you might want to go get it. Because yes, the fear here is that, again, a lot of this stuff isn't available elsewhere. A lot of this stuff is something they put up themselves. They've been doing the translations and everything, and the loss of the site itself, unless they're doing active backups, which I assume, and yes, it's not as if their server is going to get deleted unless the lawsuit involves them actually acquiring the servers themselves. It should be available elsewhere, but there's a fear there. And honestly, for me personally, yes, that's something that I do kind of agree with. This idea that it's not so much that I support piracy, but I support the idea that if it's not available anywhere, I think you should be able to consume it in some way. But yes, like I said before, this is something that's been going on for over a month, so I did kind of want to dig deeper in this whole thing rather than just make a video saying, oh my gosh, it's down, but it's back up. It's okay, everybody. Because again, this is something that's going to be ongoing. This is something that's probably going to end in nH having some sort of issue in the future. Like I said before, this actually started about a month ago. A seemingly obscure DMCA subpoena request was submitted at California Federal Court. The request came from J18 Publishing, the owner of doujinshi. With the subpoena, J18 hoped to uncover the identity of the alleged operator of the pirate site nH. nH is by no means a small site. With more than 70 million monthly visits, the free H manga and doujin reader has a sizable audience. Understandably, rights holders would like to know who's running the site. Now, this really didn't go anywhere. They submitted the DMCA, they submitted it to Cloudflare, they wanted Cloudflare to give them the information for the actual owners, and nH basically responded saying, no, you can't do that. It's a conduit service. Cloudflare themselves, all they do, they prevent DDoS attacks and whatnot. They're not storing anything that we have, so you can't submit anything to them to claim information from us. Cloudflare has clearly positioned itself as a mere conduit provider under the DMCA. nH argues the same, and stresses that DMCA subpoenas are not applicable for that reason. So essentially, they're going to be able to hide behind them. Specifically, images from nH never pass through or are stored on Cloudflare servers in any form. So essentially, yes, they have to go to Cloudflare first, and Cloudflare sends it over to them. It's not as if when somebody accesses something from nH or downloads an image from them, that it has to pass through Cloudflare. So they can't touch them. nH further notes that subpoena is too broad, arguing the owners of the domain name are not the infringers. In addition, the subpoena would violate the owner's right to anonymous speech. Now, here's where things are going to get very interesting. It's a good argument here, but this is where we're going to get into the actual court case that they're actually submitting. But in the end, the DMCA subpoena that was submitted last month didn't go anywhere. For now, the California Federal Court has stayed the matter, meaning that Cloudflare doesn't have to comply with the subpoena. Meanwhile, J18 Publishing has 2 weeks, note that, to argue why they should be granted after all. And that's where we get into the actual lawsuit that has just been submitted this week. Which, yes, right here we can see the actual court document. This is something that is actually happening. PCR Distributing Co., a California corporation, versus, yes, John Doe's. Because they don't know who owns nH. They literally don't know who owns it, so they have to file it this way. And I'm no lawyer or anything like that, but from my understanding, what this is going to be is if they can get this to go through, that can actually force the hand. And even if they can't end up finding the identity of the actual owners, this should allow them to be able to essentially have all the DNS servers take them down. Again, just based on my very vague knowledge of this. The preliminary statement, the beginning statements of this whole thing. Plaintiff PCR Distributing Co. owns, creates, acquires, translates, and distributes premium art and publications from Asia to the US market, with focus on delivering high-quality collectible products to a niche audience, operating under DBA, JAST, USA, PCR, also specializes in localization and publishing Japanese visual novels and dating sims games for the English market. Plaintiff content identified in the case is registered with the U.S. Copyright Office. By this lawsuit, plaintiff seeks to protect its registered copyright works from blatant infringement by the defendants. Plaintiff monetizes its operations through online advertising and its online platforms that serve as a gateway to drive users towards purchasing games, physical books, and merchandise. Additionally, PCR capitalizes on its fan base by offering high-value, one-of-a-kind art pieces at trade shows. Oh, this shows. I was thinking of the actual art itself. Enhancing revenue and customer loyalty. Yeah, that's the biggest problem with this whole situation. They've basically destroyed their reputation. By taking down NH, a lot of people aren't too happy with JAST and whatnot. This is something that's completely shooting them in the foot. Now, granted, I would argue that there's going to be a broader audience that has no clue what's going on here, nor do they care about NH. There's this argument that will be ongoing that a lot of people will see that what, JAST is doing right here is actually good. There's a positive side of this whole thing, because a lot of the works they're putting out there and they're publishing and selling is getting money to the actual creators, whereas what NH is doing is supplying it for free. But the problem here, and a lot of people's going to argue, and I will agree, they're taking down the entire NH website for the sake of, list down here, 5 registered works. The entire website of NH, with a ton of stuff that's not even legally available, is stuff that just people pick up, doujinshis or whatever at a con or whatever, and they submit it there. These things are not available to the general public. You would never be able to find published works of it. But for 5 works, the entire website's being destroyed. But at the same time, I agree with the idea that if they have licensed works that are being published there, they have a right to fight for them. And that sort of gets me to what I would assume this is going to turn out to be, is unless this whole lawsuit itself, which will probably be settled out of court, if it doesn't completely destroy NH through legal fees and the actual settlement itself, it could just turn to a thing where they just need to take those 5 things off. I would have argued they should have took those 5 things off before this was filed. That way, hopefully, they wouldn't have gotten destroyed like this. The conduct that gives rise to this lawsuit is egregious and willful. Defendants do business as owned and operated NH. Collectively, defendants use the domain name to distribute infringing copies of images and text works, including plaintiff's works. Defendants are directly and knowingly involved in trafficking of thousands of pirated works, including 5 registered works of the plaintiffs. We gotta make sure that we make it sound as dark and evil as possible. They do thousands of pirated works, including 5 of ours, on 3,604 individual websites. None of the infringed works posted on the site are user-generated content or third-party uploads. This is very, very, very important, by the way, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. That is, NH is not a user-generated content website. Again, very important. There is no user upload capability. Defendants are not service providers and not engaged in storage of content at a direction of users, and thus are not entitled to any of the safe harbors afforded under the DMCA. Defendants do not even attempt to comply with the takedown obligations under the DMCA that would afford them safe harbor. Now, this is the very important thing, and this is what I was sort of at first kind of brushing this off. When I heard about this whole thing where it went down itself and that there was a lawsuit going towards it, the question mark that I had is, why don't they just take it down? The assumption here is that probably JAST contacted them. Assumption, again, I don't know for sure. I tried to contact JAST themselves. Yes, there's a lawsuit going on right now. It was most likely that they weren't going to respond. Sure enough, they didn't respond. The massive question mark that I had was, did they tell them take it down? And NH just said, screw you? Because at that point, that's them willfully ignoring these legal actions that may have been prevented. Now, there's a good chance that even if they did take it down, they would still do this whole thing just to set a precedence. Because again, JAST wants to sell this stuff for a cost, and the opposite is just to pirate it from NH. Defendant's actions are causing serious harm to plaintiff and its business and must be stopped immediately. Because defendants will not desist voluntarily, plaintiff now comes before the court to seek, and again, right here, it's implying the idea that they told them, take it down, and they wouldn't do it. Again, this kind of throws it right back in NH's face. And again, I don't like this idea, especially since, again, I do see there's a lot of content on that site that you can't get anywhere, and that sucks. But at the same time, did they ignore this? Did they willingly just keep doing this? But again, this is the submission from JAST. This is the submission from their company. This could be wrong. It's a really bad thing to lie in a legal document, but this is what they're saying. This is a civil action seeking damages and injunctive relief for copyright infringement under the Copyright Act. So they're wanting damages. This is going to be very costly. Based on statistic, it looks like 79 million monthly visitors, the average viewer visiting at least 41 pages for at least 10 minutes. Damn, people. No, I'm joking. Sorry, I made a joke. Of its users, the United States make up the largest market of 24. This is something they have to establish here because this is a U.S. court filing. They want to make sure that people know, hey, yes, a lot of people are here. Japan's the next biggest market of 22%. That's actually very interesting because you would think that they'd be a lot more stringent over there. But again, a lot of this can just be because it's doujinshis. There's a lot of stuff on that site that technically doesn't have like a company behind it. Now, here's where they're going to break the whole DMCA claims. The top of nH's information page emphasizes operator-controlled, stating, no, we are not going to add a forum, ever. And the users will not have the ability to upload or edit galleries. Again, this pretty much gets rid of that idea of them having DMCA protections. The idea that this is stuff that, the users are throwing it up there. We have no control over that. Yes, we'll take it down, but you can't take legal action against us. That's kind of like the whole situation with something like YouTube. Anybody can throw up a movie onto YouTube and they won't get sued for it. They have to take it down immediately. Again, like I mentioned earlier, JAST was telling them claiming they told them take this stuff down, and nH said no. Again, the same thing with YouTube. The companies can tell YouTube take this down, and they have to take it down. If they don't, again, they'll get sued. They'll lose those protections. Again, right here, nH does not meet the requirements for safe harbor provisions of the DMCA. Specifically, defendants do not honor takedown notices. On information and belief, defendants loaded infringing materials onto nH and are the sole infringers of the works on those websites. Defendants have no license or authorization from plaintiff to copy and display plaintiff's works on nH. In the end, they require the defendants, their agents, servants, officers, blah, 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 a lot of parties, or related entities, and any or all persons, entities, and blah, 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 within 5 days of the issue of this order to block or attempt to block access by United States users of nH website by blocking or attempting to block access to all domains, subdomains, URLs, IP addresses, and the sole predominant purpose to enable to facilitate access to nH. To reroute all domains, subdomains, URLs, IP addresses that provide access to each and every URL available from nH, their domains and subdomains. Again, this is one of those things where, in the end, what it's going to end up turning into is probably being blocked across the United States. I don't think it's really going to have too much effect globally, but at least for the United States, it's going to be the case. And what that could technically mean in the end, unless, again, nH ends up getting like a massive lawsuit where they end up kind of tanking, like they lose everything. And again, they are somehow able to acquire the servers, which I doubt that. That seems like an overreach there, especially if this is an international thing, obviously, here. It might just turn into one of those things where a lot of people in the United States are probably going to have to end up using VPNs to get to it, but it's still going to be there. But again, this could set a precedence across the board for a lot of this stuff. And that's, I think, the fear that a lot of people have with this whole situation. Again, my conclusion for me is it kind of sucks that they didn't listen to the takedowns and just take down those 5 properties, but they didn't, and so that's why we're here. They were probably taking a stand for the idea that, no, we're not going to bend for that for something else. Like every single time somebody comes to us for one of these things, we bend, ultimately all this stuff gets taken down. But that's typically what a lot of websites will do. Even if they are giving a lot of pirated content, they just simply take down those one things rather than having to deal with the legal system. I don't know exactly what's going through the mind of nH, what their mindset is here, what they plan on doing with this whole situation, but I really do feel like, I don't know, I'm not a legal expert, but it seems like a very solid case here in the idea that, again, they are putting it up themselves. This isn't users putting up this stuff. They don't have those protections, and yes, they were issued to take them down. It sucks. Like I said before, this really does suck because, again, there's so much on the actual website that is not being sold. It's not legally available. And yeah, this is stuff that you can never find anywhere. Like literally, you cannot find it anywhere. It's stuff that was sold at a con or something like that by somebody, and that was it. And that's the part of this that really, really sucks. So again, I really hope that there's at least backups, that there's maybe possibly other servers that have the same content, that not everything here is just on that website. But again, I can't really fault JAST for going after their own properties. It just sucks that they end up looking like the boogeyman here because, they're taking down a whole freaking website. In the end, they're taking down all the stuff that people want to still access. And I would probably argue that a lot of those people, they're perfectly fine with just those 5 things not being available. But again, this is the legal system. That's how that works. It ends up turning into an all or nothing kind of situation here because it's an entity they're going after. I'm not sure if the owners of NH will make a statement. Again, I couldn't get anything out of JAST because, again, it's a legal document here. It's not as if they're going to speak on the matter. But anyhow, I hope you guys found this informative. If you did, hit that like button down below, comment, let me know what you think of this whole situation. Additionally, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe before you leave. If you like this content and you want to support channel more, I have links in the description below. Greatly appreciate if it does, and y'all take care.